There exists a merciless truth that most people refuse to acknowledge until they have already been devoured by it. In the theaters of power, in the corridors where fortunes are made and destroyed, in the silent battlefields of everyday human interaction, one singular principle governs all outcomes with the precision of natural law. Those who appear vulnerable become prey, not because the world is inherently cruel, but because weakness invites exploitation as surely as blood in the water summons sharks. Niccolò Machiavelli, the most misunderstood architect of political realism in human history, understood this truth with a clarity that still frightens comfortable minds 5 centuries later. He did not create these laws, he merely had the courage to name them, to strip away the decorative lies that society tells itself about how power actually works when no one is performing for an audience. The man who seems fragile, who broadcasts his vulnerabilities like a merchant displaying his wares, does not inspire compassion in the hearts of ambitious men and women. He inspires calculation. Every displayed weakness becomes an entry point, a vulnerability to be exploited, a crack in the armor through which the blade can slip. Machiavelli observed this pattern repeat itself across dynasties and republics, in palaces and public squares, with such consistency that he recognized it as fundamental to human nature itself. The weak do not inherit positions of influence. They are consumed by those who understand that power respects only strength, real or perceived. This is not a moral judgment, but a description of reality as uncompromising as gravity, and those who refuse to accept it pay the price in broken dreams and lost opportunities. Yet here lies the devastating genius of Machiavellian thought. Strength itself need not be genuine to be effective. The appearance of power, the projection of invulnerability, the careful construction of a formidable reputation, these can serve as effectively as actual force when wielded with intelligence and consistency. Machiavelli revealed that the game of power operates as much in the realm of perception as in the realm of material strength. And the wise prince understands that managing how others perceive his capabilities matters as much as the capabilities themselves. Those who grasp this distinction gain access to a form of power that requires fewer resources but greater strategic intelligence, the power that comes from being underestimated by none and feared by many. The question that haunts every person who seeks to rise above their circumstances, who dreams of influence, who refuses to be merely a piece moved by other players, is this: how does one project strength without possessing overwhelming force? And how does one avoid the appearance of weakness when circumstances are genuinely difficult? Machiavelli dedicated his life to answering these questions, not with comfortable platitudes, but with observations drawn from the bloodiest chapters of human ambition. He studied princes who fell because they seemed too kind, republics that collapsed because they appeared too democratic, leaders who were destroyed not by their actual weakness, but by their perceived vulnerability. From this study emerged laws of power so precise and so universally applicable that they remain as relevant in corporate boardrooms and social hierarchies today as they were in the Italian city-states of the Renaissance. What you are about to discover are not theoretical abstractions or philosophical musings disconnected from practical reality. These are operational principles that have determined the fate of nations, the survival of dynasties, and the trajectory of individual lives across every culture and every era of recorded history. Machiavelli offers no comfort to the naive, no reassurance to those who wish the world were gentler than it is. He offers something far more valuable: a clear-eyed understanding of how power actually operates when stripped of its decorative pretenses, and a strategic framework for those brave enough to compete in the real arena rather than the imaginary one described in children's stories. The world will indeed crush those who appear weak, not because it is evil, but because that is simply what the world does. The only question is whether you will understand these laws well enough to ensure you are never the one being crushed. The first law that Machiavelli illuminates with surgical precision concerns the fundamental relationship between perception and reality in the exercise of power. A prince, he argues, must appear to embody all the virtues that people claim to admire: mercy, faith, integrity, humanity, and religion. Yet the actual possession of these qualities, carried to their logical conclusion, becomes the very instrument of his destruction. The paradox strikes at the heart of comfortable moral reasoning, for Machiavelli is not suggesting that virtue itself is worthless, but rather that the uncompromising practice of virtue in a world where others do not reciprocate transforms goodness into suicide. The leader who is genuinely merciful to everyone discovers that the cruel take advantage of his mercy. The one who keeps all promises finds himself bound while others break their word without consequence. And the truly humble man watches as the proudly ambitious step over him on their way to positions he could have held. This creates what Machiavelli recognized as the central dilemma of leadership. One must know how to do evil when necessity demands it, yet simultaneously maintain the reputation of goodness that earns public support and legitimacy. The appearance of virtue provides the foundation of popular support and moral authority, while the willingness to act with calculated ruthlessness when circumstances require it ensures survival in a competitive environment. Those who possess only the appearance become hollow shells that collapse under pressure, while those who possess only the ruthless capability without the legitimizing appearance become tyrants who provoke rebellion. The sophisticated leader cultivates both dimensions, understanding that they serve different but equally essential functions in the maintenance of power. The mechanism through which this operates reveals itself in the way human beings actually judge those who hold authority over them. People, Machiavelli notes with anthropological detachment, generally judge by appearances rather than by touching the reality beneath. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are, and those few who do see beneath the surface dare not contradict the majority who believe the carefully constructed image. This asymmetry between appearance and reality creates a space within which the intelligent operator can maneuver, projecting strength and decisiveness publicly, while privately acknowledging vulnerabilities and making pragmatic calculations that would horrify those who believe in absolute principles. Consider the leader who faces a difficult choice between keeping a promise that will weaken his position or breaking that promise to preserve his strength. The naive moralist insists that promises must always be kept regardless of consequence, effectively announcing to all observers that this leader can be manipulated through his own rigidity. Machiavelli observes that such predictability becomes a fatal weakness, for opponents learn to extract concessions by simply invoking prior commitments, turning honor itself into chains. The Machiavellian leader, by contrast, weighs each commitment against current circumstances, keeps promises when doing so, maintains his reputation and serves his interests, but breaks them without hesitation when keeping them would produce his ruin. This is not random treachery, but calculated flexibility, and the key lies in breaking promises in ways that can be defended or explained, maintaining plausible justification that preserves the appearance of reasonableness even when acting with pure self-interest. The projection of strength begins not with actual capability, but with the elimination of behaviors that signal weakness. Excessive apology, constant qualification of one's own statements, visible uncertainty in decision-making, public displays of internal conflict, these all broadcast vulnerability to those who are scanning for opportunities to advance their own positions. Machiavelli understood that leadership operates in an environment of incomplete information where others must estimate your resolve, your capabilities, and your willingness to defend your interests. Every signal you send contributes to that estimation, and those who send signals of doubt or weakness should not be surprised when others test their boundaries, challenge their authority, or simply ignore their preferences. The ruthless efficiency with which the world punishes perceived weakness stems from a simple evolutionary logic that Machiavelli grasped intuitively. In any competitive system, resources flow towards strength and away from weakness, because aligning with strength provides protection and opportunity, while aligning with weakness provides neither. The leader who appears weak finds allies deserting, subordinates questioning orders, and opponents emboldened to push further than they would against someone who projects unshakable confidence. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where initial signs of weakness lead to challenges. Those challenges further expose vulnerability, and increased vulnerability attracts even more aggressive challenges until the entire structure collapses. Machiavelli's genius lies in recognizing that the only way to interrupt this death spiral is to never enter it in the first place. To cultivate, from the very beginning, a reputation for strength that makes even considering a challenge seem like a poor investment. The leader who internalizes this first law understands that much of leadership consists of theater, but theater with deadly serious consequences. The performance of confidence, competence, and control must be so consistent and so convincing that it becomes indistinguishable from reality in the minds of observers. This is not mere deception, but rather the creation of social facts through collective belief. If everyone believes you are strong, you become strong through their belief, because they adjust their behavior based on that perception. The moment doubt enters this system, the moment the performance falters or inconsistencies appear, the entire edifice of perceived power can crumble with shocking speed. Therefore, the Machiavellian operator never relaxes the performance, never drops the mask in ways that subordinates or rivals might observe. Because maintaining the appearance of strength is not secondary to the work of leadership, but constitutes the very essence of it. The second law that Machiavelli derives from his unflinching observation of political reality concerns the relationship between generosity and power, a relationship that inverts the common understanding in ways that make moralists uncomfortable. A prince who wishes to maintain a reputation for generosity among men, Machiavelli argues, must not neglect any form of lavish display. Yet such displays inevitably consume resources until the prince must burden his people with taxes and do everything possible to get money, actions that make him hated by his subjects and esteemed by no one because of his poverty. The generosity that seemed like a virtue becomes a trap that produces the opposite of its intended effect, creating resentment rather than gratitude and weakness rather than popularity. The mechanism through which this operates reveals a profound truth about human psychology that comfortable thinking prefers to ignore. Generosity extended once creates expectation. The recipients begin to view continued generosity not as a gift, but as an entitlement, and any reduction or cessation of the flow produces anger disproportionate to the actual loss. The leader who builds his reputation on lavish giving discovers that he has created a monster of expectation that must be constantly fed, and the moment he can no longer sustain the feeding, those who praised his generosity become his bitterest critics. They do not remember the gifts he gave when resources were abundant. They remember only that the gifts have stopped, and they interpret this as betrayal rather than as the natural consequence of limited resources. Machiavelli, therefore, counsels a strategy that seems counterintuitive but proves devastatingly effective. It is better to be considered miserly than to pursue a reputation for generosity that cannot be sustained. The miserly prince faces some initial criticism for his parsimony, but he maintains the resources necessary to defend his position without burdening his people with oppressive taxation. Over time, his frugality is recognized as wisdom rather than stinginess, for it allows him to avoid the extortions that a spendthrift prince must impose. His people, spared the crushing taxes that generosity would have eventually required, come to appreciate his restraint, even if they never love him for it. More importantly, when he does occasionally extend generosity from his accumulated reserves, the generosity carries enormous impact precisely because it arrives unexpectedly, creating gratitude rather than entitlement. The projection of strength through this law manifests in the leader's apparent self-sufficiency, the signal that he needs nothing from others and operates from a position of abundance rather than desperation. Those who constantly seek approval through giving reveal their weakness, their desperate need to purchase loyalty and affection because they cannot command it through respect or fear. The truly strong leader understands that respect must precede generosity for generosity to have any value, and that giving from a position of weakness appears not as magnanimity, but as tribute paid by the fearful to avoid destruction. People instinctively recognize the difference between a gift given by one who could easily withhold it and a payment extracted by necessity, and they respond with entirely different emotions to these superficially similar transfers of resources. The world crushes the generous weak with particular efficiency because such leaders advertise their willingness to sacrifice their own interests for the approval of others. This immediately invites exploitation from every direction. Subordinates demand more resources for themselves, allies expect constant subsidies for their support, and enemies recognize that applying pressure produces concessions. The generous, weak leader becomes a cow that everyone wishes to milk, valued not for any inherent strength, but purely for the resources that can be extracted before the inevitable collapse. Machiavelli observed this pattern destroy princes who believed that kindness and generosity would earn them love sufficient to protect them, only to discover that love evaporates the moment the gifts stop flowing, while the hatred produced by the necessary taxation to fund the gifts remains permanent. The sophisticated application of this law requires understanding when strategic generosity serves strength rather than reveals weakness. Generosity deployed from abundance, targeted precisely where it will produce maximum strategic benefit, timed to arrive unexpectedly rather than as expected tribute. This form of giving reinforces rather than undermines the giver's position. It demonstrates capacity rather than necessity, confidence rather than anxiety, strategic calculation rather than desperate people-pleasing. The recipient recognizes that the gift could have been withheld without consequence, which makes the giving itself a demonstration of power rather than weakness. This is the generosity of the strong, fundamentally different in its effects from the generosity of the weak, though the actual transfer of resources may appear identical to superficial observation. The leader who appears weak through misguided generosity finds himself trapped in a cage constructed from the expectations he created. He cannot stop giving without producing anger and potential rebellion. Yet continuing to give consumes the resources he needs for genuine security and independence. This trap operates with mechanical precision. Give more to maintain the appearance of strength through popularity, exhaust resources doing so, become actually weak through depletion, and finally collapse when some crisis demands resources that have already been distributed in pursuit of affection. Machiavelli presents this pattern not as a moral failing, but as a strategic error, a misunderstanding of how power actually operates when stripped of the mythology that society wraps around it. The prince who learns this law early enough can avoid the trap entirely by never entering it, maintaining the discipline to appear occasionally miserly rather than consistently generous, preserving his resources for genuine necessities rather than dissipating them in pursuit of applause that provides no real security. The third law emerges from Machiavelli's ruthless analysis of how leaders must relate to potential threats, a domain where mercy and cruelty exchange their conventional meanings in ways that expose the bankruptcy of simplistic moral reasoning. It is better, he argues, to be feared than loved when one cannot have both, and far safer to be feared than loved when one must choose between them. This assertion strikes modern sensibilities as the statement of a monster, yet Machiavelli supports it with logic so clear that it cannot be dismissed by those willing to think rather than merely feel. Men love at their own convenience, but fear at the convenience of the prince, and the wise leader therefore builds his security on what he controls rather than on what others choose to grant or withhold according to their momentary preferences. The mechanism reveals itself in the asymmetry between love and fear as motivators of loyalty and obedience. Love, Machiavelli observes with the detachment of a naturalist examining specimens, is held by a chain of obligation which, because men are wretched creatures, is broken at every opportunity for personal advantage. Fear, by contrast, is maintained by a dread of punishment that never fails, as long as the prince maintains the capacity and demonstrated willingness to inflict consequences. This is not because human beings are inherently evil, but because they are inherently self-interested, and self-interest responds more reliably to immediate danger than to affection when the two come into conflict. The leader who builds his authority on love discovers during moments of genuine crisis that love evaporates precisely when it is most needed, while the leader who builds on measured fear finds that fear persists even when his actual power temporarily weakens. Yet Machiavelli immediately qualifies this principle with a sophistication that his critics conveniently ignore. The prince must make himself feared in such a way that he avoids hatred, because hatred destroys the very foundation that fear is meant to establish. Fear that crosses into terror and oppression produces desperate men willing to risk everything for revenge, transforming subjects into mortal enemies who see no option but resistance. The art lies in calibrating fear precisely, strong enough to deter challenges and ensure compliance, but measured enough to leave subjects believing that obedience offers a better outcome than rebellion. This requires the leader to demonstrate capacity for ruthlessness, while simultaneously showing that ruthlessness is deployed strategically rather than randomly, punishing genuine threats while leaving the compliant unmolested. The projection of strength through this law manifests most clearly in how the leader responds to challenges and tests of authority. Every organization, every hierarchy, every structure of power faces these tests, moments when someone questions whether the leader actually possesses the will to enforce consequences or merely pretends to such capacity. The leader who appears weak fails these tests by responding with words rather than actions, with threats that are never executed, with warnings that become increasingly shrill as they are increasingly ignored. Each failed response to a challenge teaches observers that the leader's bark vastly exceeds his bite, and each such lesson emboldens further challenges until the entire authority structure collapses under the weight of accumulated contempt. The Machiavellian leader, by contrast, recognizes these tests for what they are and responds with calculated severity that teaches a lesson extending far beyond the immediate case. When someone challenges authority, the response must be swift, decisive, and memorable enough that others do not need to test the boundaries themselves. This is not cruelty for its own sake, but rather the strategic use of example to prevent the need for widespread punishment. Better to severely punish one or two violations early, establishing clear boundaries and demonstrating genuine will, than to tolerate many small violations that eventually require mass punishment to restore order. The apparent cruelty of the early punishment actually minimizes total suffering by preventing the escalation that tolerance would inevitably produce. The world crushes those who appear weak through misplaced mercy, because mercy toward the wrong targets at the wrong moments reads as inability to act rather than as magnanimity. When a leader faces a clear challenge to his authority and responds with understanding and forgiveness, observers throughout the system learn that challenges carry no cost. This knowledge spreads like a virus, each instance of unpunished defiance encouraging others to test their own boundaries until the leader finds himself surrounded by people who no longer take his directives seriously. At this point, restoring order requires a level of violence far exceeding what would have been necessary had boundaries been clearly established and firmly maintained from the beginning. The merciful weak leader thus creates through his weakness the very conditions that eventually force him to choose between massive cruelty or abdication. The sophisticated understanding of this law recognizes that fear and respect operate as closely related phenomena, often indistinguishable in practice. The leader who is feared for his competence, his decisiveness, his unwavering enforcement of standards and consequences, this leader earns a form of respect that proves far more durable than affection. His people may not love him, but they trust that he will do what he says. They believe in his strength and capability, and they prefer to remain in his good graces rather than face the consequences of opposition. This creates a stable foundation for authority that does not depend on the fickle emotions of affection, but rather on the rational calculations of self-interest. The Machiavellian leader thus builds his house on stone rather than sand, on fear that endures rather than love that fluctuates, on respect earned through demonstrated capability rather than popularity purchased through weakness. The fourth law addresses the relationship between promises and flexibility, a domain where Machiavelli's realism reaches heights that make conventional moralists denounce him as the teacher of evil itself. A prudent ruler, he argues, cannot and should not keep his word when doing so would be against his interest, and when the reasons that made him promise no longer exist. If men were all good, this would be bad advice. But since men are wicked and will not keep faith with you, you are not bound to keep faith with them. This principle strikes at the heart of systems built on trust and reciprocity. Yet Machiavelli presents it not as moral philosophy, but as survival strategy in an environment where rigid adherence to promises becomes a tool that opponents use to extract concessions and manipulate outcomes. The mechanism operates through the asymmetry between those who keep all promises, regardless of changing circumstances, and those who treat promises as tactical instruments to be kept or broken according to strategic calculation. The rigid promise keeper broadcasts to all observers a fundamental predictability that transforms into exploitability. His opponents learn to extract promises during moments of weakness, then hold him to those promises even when circumstances shift entirely, using his own honor as chains that bind him while they operate with complete flexibility. Over time, the promise keeper finds himself in progressively worse positions, each previous commitment limiting his options until he has negotiated himself into a corner from which no escape exists without breaking faith. Machiavelli therefore counsels the strategic use of promises as tools rather than sacred bonds, commitments made seriously but always subject to the proviso that circumstances remain substantially similar to those that existed when the promise was given. When circumstances change dramatically, the promise becomes void not through treachery, but through the logical principle that commitments made under one set of conditions need not be honored under entirely different conditions. The sophisticated leader makes this principle explicit when giving promises, conditioning them on the continuation of circumstances that made them reasonable, creating space to adjust course without appearing to engage in random betrayal. The projection of strength through this law manifests in the leader's demonstrated willingness to change course when circumstances change, refusing to be bound by obsolete commitments that no longer serve any rational purpose. Those who appear weak maintain commitments long after they become destructive, unable to admit error or shift position because they fear the criticism that flexibility invites. They privilege consistency over effectiveness, appearance over results, and their organizations suffer accordingly. The strong leader, by contrast, demonstrates the confidence to reverse previous positions when new information warrants such reversal, showing that his commitment is to effectiveness rather than to maintaining a facade of unchanging certainty. Yet Machiavelli adds a crucial qualification that reveals the sophistication beneath his reputation for cynicism. A leader should appear to be all mercy, all faith, all integrity, all humanity, all religion, and nothing is more necessary than to seem to have this last quality. The key word is seem, for he recognizes that reputation matters enormously in determining how much flexibility others will tolerate before condemning the leader as treacherous. The leader who builds a strong reputation for honesty and integrity earns the benefit of doubt when circumstances force him to break a promise, his overall reputation providing cover for occasional necessary flexibility. Those who casually break promises without such reputational capital find themselves condemned immediately, their betrayal seen as character rather than as response to changed circumstances. The world crushes the inflexible weak with particular efficiency because inflexibility in a changing environment guarantees progressive mismatch between commitments and reality. The leader who binds himself to obsolete promises watches as more flexible competitors exploit changing circumstances while he remains trapped by his word. His honor, rather than protecting him, becomes the instrument of his defeat, as opponents engineer situations where his commitments force him into disadvantageous positions. Machiavelli observed princes destroyed not by their dishonesty, but by their excessive honesty, their inability to adapt their commitments to changed reality, their transformation of virtue into rigidity that reality punished without mercy. The sophisticated application of this law requires understanding when keeping promises reinforces strength and when it reveals weakness. Promises kept when doing so maintains valuable relationships, demonstrates reliability to key constituencies, or costs little compared to the reputational benefit. These promise-keepings strengthen the leader's position. Promises kept when doing so produces significant damage, when circumstances have changed so dramatically that the original logic no longer applies, or when opponents are clearly manipulating the promise to extract advantage. These promise-keepings signal weakness and invite further exploitation. The Machiavellian leader distinguishes between these cases with cold clarity, keeping faith when strategy recommends it, but breaking faith without guilt when necessity demands it. The art lies in breaking promises in ways that minimize reputational damage while preserving operational flexibility. This requires careful management of narrative. When breaking a promise, the leader must provide justification that makes the break appear not as betrayal, but as reasonable response to betrayal by others or to dramatic change in circumstances. He must, in Machiavelli's words, be a great liar and deceiver, finding reasons and arguments that make the broken promise seem necessary or even virtuous. The leader who masters this art operates with enormous flexibility while maintaining the reputation for reliability that allows such flexibility to be tolerated. Those who lack this skill must choose between rigid inflexibility that circumstances will eventually punish or casual promise, breaking that destroys reputation and leaves them isolated. The Machiavellian path navigates between these extremes, maintaining flexibility through strategic reputation management rather than through either extreme of behavior. The fifth law emerges from Machiavelli's observation of how timing and decisiveness relate to perceived strength, a domain where the appearance of weakness often stems not from lack of capability, but from paralysis in the face of difficult choices. In taking a state, he argues, the conqueror must arrange to commit all his cruelties at once, so as not to have to recur to them every day, and so as to reassure people and win them over by benefiting them. Injuries, therefore, should be inflicted all at once, so that their sharp taste being felt less, they offend less. Benefits should be granted little by little, so that they may be better enjoyed. This principle extends far beyond military conquest to any situation where a leader must make difficult decisions that will inevitably harm some interests in order to secure overall stability. The mechanism reveals itself in how human psychology responds to ongoing pain versus pain that arrives in a single moment and then ends. Continuous small injuries maintain wounds permanently open, each new cut preventing previous wounds from healing, creating a state of perpetual grievance and resentment. The victim of such treatment never experiences relief, never moves past the initial harm to any kind of acceptance or adaptation, because new harm keeps arriving before old harm can be processed and integrated. By contrast, a single large injury, though more painful in the immediate moment, at least allows for eventual healing once the immediate shock passes. The victim knows the worst has happened, can begin to adapt to the new reality, and faces no fear of additional injuries repeatedly reopening wounds. Machiavelli therefore counsels leaders facing difficult restructuring, necessary terminations, or other forms of organizational pain to consolidate such actions into decisive moments rather than spreading them over time. The leader who must reduce headcount by 20% faces a choice: eliminate all 20% at once in a single painful day, or eliminate a few percent each quarter over multiple years. The conventional wisdom suggests that gradual reduction seems more humane, giving people time to adjust and find alternatives. Machiavelli recognizes this as precisely backwards. The gradual approach maintains an atmosphere of perpetual anxiety where everyone wonders whether they will be in the next group eliminated. Trust collapses, productivity suffers, and resentment builds with each successive wave. The single large reduction, though brutal, at least provides certainty to survivors and allows the organization to move forward without the poison of ongoing fear. The projection of strength through this law manifests in the leader's willingness to make difficult decisions decisively rather than incrementally, accepting short-term pain to achieve long-term stability. Those who appear weak avoid the difficult consolidation, hoping that spreading pain over time will reduce criticism. Instead, they guarantee maximum criticism by providing opponents endless opportunities to attack each successive action while preventing the organization from ever moving past the restructuring into normal productive operation. The strong leader understands that some situations cannot be improved gradually but require radical intervention, and that attempting gradual solutions to problems requiring decisive action merely prolongs suffering while appearing weak to all observers. Yet the full sophistication of this principle emerges in the second half of the formulation, the instruction to grant benefits little by little so they may be better enjoyed. This reveals Machiavelli's understanding of psychological asymmetry in how humans process gains and losses. A large benefit delivered all at once produces intense gratitude in the immediate moment, but that gratitude fades quickly as people adapt to their new circumstances and begin taking the benefit for granted. Multiple small benefits delivered over time, by contrast, produce repeated waves of gratitude, each new benefit refreshing appreciation and preventing the adaptation that would occur if all benefits arrived simultaneously. The leader who masters this asymmetry front-loads pain while backloading reward, creating organizations that move quickly through necessary difficulties into extended periods of steady improvement. The world crushes the indecisive weak with particular efficiency because indecision in the face of necessary but difficult action reads as both incompetence and cowardice. When everyone can see that a situation requires intervention, that ongoing problems will not resolve themselves, that difficult choices must be made, the leader who delays or who attempts compromise solutions that satisfy no one demonstrates his unsuitability for leadership. His temporizing reveals either inability to perceive the necessity of action or inability to summon the will to act despite perceiving the necessity. Either way, observers conclude that he lacks essential qualities of leadership, and they begin considering alternatives. The sophisticated application of this law requires distinguishing between situations that benefit from gradual approach and those that demand decisive intervention. Problems that respond to incremental improvement, that allow learning through iteration, that benefit from stakeholder input and adjustment. These situations reward gradual approaches. Problems that have festered into crisis, that require fundamental restructuring rather than marginal adjustment, that will only worsen if left partially addressed. These situations demand the decisive consolidation of necessary pain that Machiavelli prescribes. The weak leader fails to distinguish between these categories, applying gradualism to situations requiring decisiveness and decisiveness to situations better suited for iterative refinement. The leader who internalizes this fifth law develops a reputation for decisiveness that itself becomes a source of strength. People throughout the organization learn that when this leader identifies a problem requiring intervention, that intervention will be swift, thorough, and final, rather than tentative, partial, and subject to endless revisiting. This knowledge produces acceptance. People may not like the difficult changes, but they trust that the changes have been made for clear reasons and will not be endlessly reconsidered and readjusted. The organization can therefore move forward into productive work rather than remaining paralyzed by ongoing restructuring. This decisiveness projects strength even when the decisions themselves are unpopular, because observers recognize the capability for action as a fundamental quality of effective leadership, regardless of whether they agree with particular actions. The sixth law addresses the relationship between isolation and vulnerability, revealing how the appearance of weakness often stems from a leader's failure to understand the strategic value of alliances and the deadly danger of neutrality in competitive environments. A prince, Machiavelli argues, must never remain neutral between two powerful contenders. If you do not declare yourself, you will always be the prey of the victor along with the vanquished, and you will have no reason or anything to protect you. The winner will want nothing to do with you because you refuse to share his risks in victory, and the loser will not receive you because you are unwilling to take up arms to share his fate. This principle operates with mechanical precision in any environment where power is contested, and observers must choose sides or suffer the consequences of attempted neutrality. The mechanism through which this operates reveals a fundamental truth about how alliances actually form and function. Those who commit to a side during times of uncertainty and risk earn the gratitude and trust that comes from having shared danger. They become partners who proved their loyalty when the outcome was unclear, demonstrating through action that their commitment transcends mere calculation of immediate advantage. The winner of any contest remembers who stood with him when victory was uncertain, and he rewards such allies not merely from gratitude, but from the rational recognition that they have proven themselves reliable. By contrast, those who waited to see which side would win before offering support reveal themselves as purely opportunistic, willing to ally only when no risk exists. Such allies prove their unreliability through their very caution, demonstrating that they will abandon any partnership the moment it becomes inconvenient. Machiavelli therefore counsels leaders to embrace strategic commitment rather than attempting to preserve flexibility through neutrality. When two powerful forces enter conflict and your interests are affected by the outcome, attempting to remain neutral does not protect you, but rather marks you as a target for whichever side prevails. The victor sees your neutrality as implicit opposition, a refusal to support his just cause, and he remembers your failure to assist when assistance might have mattered. The vanquished sees your neutrality as betrayal, an abandonment when loyalty was needed, and he carries resentment that will express itself if fortunes later reverse. Your attempt to avoid risk by refusing commitment actually maximizes risk by ensuring that both potential outcomes produce hostile relationships. The projection of strength through this law manifests in the leader's willingness to take clear positions on contested issues. To ally openly with chosen partners, even when doing so creates enemies. To demonstrate through action that his commitments mean something because they carry real cost. Those who appear weak refuse such clarity, attempting to maintain relationships with all sides, avoiding statements or actions that might offend anyone, preserving theoretical flexibility that in practice becomes paralysis. Their fence-sitting reads, not as wisdom, but as weakness, a desperate attempt to avoid choosing that reveals inability to assess situations and commit to positions based on genuine strategic calculation. Yet Machiavelli adds important qualifications that reveal the sophistication beneath the surface principle. The choice of which side to support must be made through careful analysis of respective strengths, examination of how each potential ally aligns with long-term interests, and assessment of what each side offers in exchange for support. The principle is not to commit randomly, but to commit intelligently after genuine strategic analysis, then to honor that commitment with sufficient visibility that the chosen ally recognizes the value of the partnership. Additionally, Machiavelli notes that when forced to choose between two powerful contenders, one should generally prefer the weaker side, because victory alongside the weaker party leaves you stronger relative to your ally, while victory alongside the stronger party leaves you merely a subordinate whose assistance was nice to have, but not essential. The world crushes the neutral weak with particular efficiency because neutrality in the face of genuine conflict reads as an attempt to gain benefits without accepting costs, to enjoy protection without providing it in return, to free ride on the efforts of others who bear the risks of commitment. Such behavior invites contempt from all sides and protection from none. When the contest concludes, the victor has no reason to extend generosity to those who offered no assistance, and the vanquished has no reason to show mercy to those who refused alliance. The neutral party discovers too late that the flexibility they sought to preserve through non-commitment becomes worthlessness when circumstances force them to seek allies and they find none willing to trust someone who has demonstrated unreliability through previous neutrality. The sophisticated application of this law requires understanding when strategic clarity serves strength and when it reveals weakness. In contests where the sides are genuinely balanced and outcome remains uncertain, clear commitment demonstrates strength, and builds valuable alliances. In situations where one side possesses overwhelming advantage and opposition would be suicidal, attempting to remain neutral or even strategically aligning with the likely victor may make sense. The key distinction lies in genuine strategic analysis rather than fearful avoidance of choice. The Machiavellian leader commits when commitment serves strategic objectives, even when such commitment carries risk, because he understands that the reputation for reliability and the relationships built through shared danger provide returns exceeding the risks undertaken. The leader who masters this sixth law builds a network of alliances grounded in demonstrated loyalty during times of uncertainty. Such networks prove far more durable than relationships built purely on mutual advantage because they rest on proven commitment rather than on temporary alignment of interests. When this leader faces his own difficulties, allies remember that he stood with them when they faced theirs, and reciprocal loyalty activates. By contrast, the leader who attempted to preserve flexibility through neutrality finds himself isolated precisely when he most needs support, surrounded by those who remember his previous fence-sitting and who feel no obligation to assist someone who has demonstrated that assistance flows only one direction. The seventh law emerges from Machiavelli's analysis of how leaders must relate to both fortune and capability, a domain where the appearance of strength or weakness often determines outcomes independent of actual resources. A prince who bases his power entirely on fortune, he argues, falls when fortune changes. But one who has laid solid foundations through his own prowess and preparation finds that fortune cannot destroy what capability has built. The relationship between what we control and what we cannot control, between our actions and the circumstances that those actions encounter, this relationship determines whether we project strength or weakness in ways that fundamentally affect how others respond to us. The mechanism operates through the distinction between leaders who actively shape circumstances and those who merely react to circumstances as they arise. The reactive leader waits for opportunities to present themselves, responds to crises as they emerge, addresses problems only after they become undeniable. Such leadership creates an impression of being driven by events rather than driving them, of being swept along by currents too strong to resist. Others observing this pattern conclude that the leader lacks the capacity to shape outcomes, that he serves as a weather vane, indicating direction rather than as a force determining it. This perception of powerlessness becomes self-fulfilling as supporters lose confidence, opponents gain courage, and the leader finds himself with progressively fewer resources as fortune's tide recedes. Machiavelli therefore counsels leaders to demonstrate agency through preparation, anticipation, and initiative rather than waiting for circumstances to force action. The strong leader identifies potential problems while they remain manageable, implements solutions before crisis makes them desperate, and positions his organization to exploit opportunities before they become obvious to competitors. This creates an impression of control and foresight that builds confidence among supporters and caution among opponents. Even when fortune turns against such a leader, his demonstrated capability for planning and execution suggests that the setback is temporary rather than fatal, maintaining support through difficult periods that would cause supporters of a more passive leader to abandon ship. The projection of strength through this law manifests most clearly in how the leader frames both successes and failures. When events turn favorably, the weak leader attributes success entirely to fortune, luck, or circumstances beyond his control. This attribution, though perhaps intended as modesty, actually undermines his position by suggesting he contributed little to positive outcomes. When events turn unfavorably, this same leader blames circumstances, predecessors, or subordinates, refusing to accept responsibility but thereby revealing impotence in the face of difficulty. The Machiavellian leader inverts this pattern. He accepts responsibility for both successes and failures, demonstrating through his framing that he sees himself as an agent who shapes outcomes rather than as a victim of circumstances. This claim of agency itself becomes a source of power as others come to believe in his capacity to influence events. Yet the full sophistication of this principle reveals itself in understanding the relationship between preparation and opportunism. Machiavelli does not counsel rigid planning that ignores changing circumstances, but rather thorough preparation that enables quick exploitation of opportunities as they arise. Fortune, he suggests, is like a river that floods destructively when no preparations have been made to contain it, but flows productively through channels built during calm periods. The leader who prepares thoroughly during times of calm finds that fortune's variations work in his favor, his preparations allowing him to exploit favorable circumstances and survive unfavorable ones. The unprepared leader finds that both good fortune and bad produce chaos, the former because he lacks capacity to exploit it, and the latter because he lacks defenses against it. The world crushes the fortune-dependent weak because dependence on factors beyond one's control inevitably produces periods when those factors align unfavorably, and such periods reveal the hollowness beneath the facade. Leaders who rose through luck rather than capability find themselves completely exposed when luck changes, lacking the skills and preparations necessary to navigate difficulty. Their fair-weather supporters scatter immediately, recognizing that proximity to fortune's favorites makes sense only when fortune smiles, and that remaining allied to someone whose capability was always illusory would be foolish once circumstances reveal that illusion. The sophisticated application of this law requires understanding that appearing strong means demonstrating control over events even when such control is partial at best. Human beings respect capability to shape outcomes, to overcome obstacles, to turn unfavorable circumstances to advantage through intelligence and preparation. They do not respect passive acceptance of whatever fortune provides, regardless of whether fortune happens to provide favorably or unfavorably in particular moments. The leader who projects strength therefore claims agency even when circumstances constrain him, focusing attention on what he can control rather than on what he cannot, demonstrating through action that he sees himself as an actor rather than a victim. The leader who internalizes this seventh law develops a reputation for effectiveness that survives temporary setbacks without damage. His people learn that when circumstances create problems, this leader finds solutions rather than excuses, that when opportunities arise, he capitalizes on them rather than letting them slip away, that planning and preparation characterize his approach to leadership. This reputation becomes a reservoir of confidence that carries the organization through difficulties, as people trust that current problems will be solved just as previous problems were solved. By contrast, the leader who attributes all outcomes to forces beyond his control builds no such reservoir. And the first serious difficulty produces panic as people recognize his inability to navigate challenges. The eighth and final law synthesizes Machiavelli's insights about the relationship between appearance and reality in the projection of strength, revealing how the sophisticated operator understands that perception management is not supplementary to actual capability, but constitutes a distinct and equally important domain of power. A prince, he concludes, must have two fears: one internal concerning his subjects, one external concerning foreign powers. Against external threats, he defends himself through good arms and good allies. And if he has good arms, he will always have good allies. Against internal threats, he defends himself by not being hated or despised by the people. The asymmetry between these two domains reveals itself in how they relate to appearance versus reality. External power rests heavily on actual military capability, but internal power rests heavily on managing how subjects perceive their ruler. The mechanism through which this operates reveals why leaders fail more often from appearing weak than from actually being weak. External enemies can assess military capability through intelligence, observation of actual conflicts, and analysis of resources. Such assessment, while imperfect, connects reasonably well to underlying reality and gives external threats some genuine information about whether attacking makes strategic sense. Internal subjects, by contrast, rarely have good information about their ruler's actual capabilities or constraints. They rely instead on appearance, reputation, symbols, and the leader's public presentation of himself. This creates enormous space for skilled operators to shape perception independent of reality, appearing far stronger than they are, and thereby deterring challenges that might succeed if subjects accurately understood the ruler's genuine vulnerability. Machiavelli therefore places enormous emphasis on avoiding actions or appearances that make the ruler seem contemptible or hateable in the eyes of his subjects. Being considered hateable makes the ruler a target for ambitious individuals who can present themselves as liberators, while being considered contemptible makes him a target for opportunists who see him as easy prey. The combination of these two perceptions produces the most dangerous situation, where the ruler faces both motivated challengers who see removing him as a service to the people and calculating predators who see him as weak enough to be safely attacked. Avoiding these perceptions requires careful attention to symbolism, to public presentation, to the narratives that circulate about the ruler's character and capabilities. The projection of strength through this law manifests in the leader's understanding that different audiences require different performances. External threats respond to demonstrations of actual capability, military preparedness, defensive fortifications, alliance networks, economic strength. These things can be shown through visible actions that external observers can verify. Internal subjects respond more to character and reputation. Does the leader seem decisive or weak, just or arbitrary, strong or contemptible? These qualities manifest through symbolism and narrative, rather than through directly observable capabilities. And they can be shaped through careful performance, even when underlying reality provides less impressive material. The sophisticated leader therefore maintains two separate fronts of strength projection, each calibrated to its respective audience. Externally, he ensures that potential aggressors see sufficient capability that attack appears unattractive, regardless of internal dissatisfaction among his subjects. This prevents external powers from attempting to exploit internal discontent, recognizing that even a somewhat unpopular but militarily capable ruler makes a more dangerous enemy than the risk justifies. Internally, he ensures that subjects see a ruler who, whatever his other qualities, clearly possesses the capacity and will to maintain order and the resolution to punish challenges. This prevents internal challengers from attempting coups or rebellions, recognizing that success would require overcoming genuine defensive capabilities, even if the ruler's popularity has limits. The world crushes those who appear weak on either front because weakness in one domain invites attacks that spread to both. A ruler who appears weak externally faces invasion, and such invasion emboldens internal challengers who see opportunity in the chaos of external conflict. A ruler who appears weak internally faces rebellion, and such rebellion invites external intervention from foreign powers who see opportunity in domestic instability. The appearance of weakness thus creates cascading failures, where problems in one domain metastasize into problems in all domains, overwhelming even rulers whose actual capabilities might have been sufficient to handle challenges in a single domain. Machiavelli's final insight concerns the relationship between being armed and being respected. The prince who fails to maintain military capability, who allows his defenses to decay or his forces to become ineffective, inevitably loses the respect even of his own people. They see his weakness as contemptible, they lose confidence in his ability to protect them, and they begin considering whether alternative leadership might provide better security. Conversely, the prince who maintains strong arms, even at significant cost to other programs, earns a fundamental respect that extends far beyond the immediate utility of those arms. People recognize strength even when they complain about its cost, and they prefer to remain under the protection of the strong rather than risk the vulnerability that comes from weak leadership. The sophisticated application of this law requires understanding that strength must be demonstrated rather than merely possessed. Capabilities that exist but remain invisible provide less security than smaller capabilities that are highly visible, because deterrence operates through perception rather than through reality. The leader who projects strength through ceremonial displays, through visible military preparations, through public demonstrations of decisive action when challenged, this leader enjoys security exceeding what his actual resources might suggest. The leader who possesses significant capabilities but fails to demonstrate them, who keeps his strength hidden, or who appears reluctant to use it, this leader suffers challenges despite having resources sufficient to defeat those challenges if they occur. The leader who masters this eighth law understands that he operates simultaneously as both strategist managing actual capabilities and as performer managing perceptions of those capabilities. Neither domain can be neglected without producing vulnerability. Pure performance without underlying capability eventually gets exposed when challenges force action rather than merely threatening it. Pure capability without effective performance fails to deter challenges, forcing the ruler to actually use capabilities that could have remained dormant if proper appearances had prevented challenges from arising. The Machiavellian leader integrates these domains, building real capability while simultaneously ensuring that such capability remains highly visible to all potential challengers, creating security through the combination of substance and effective presentation of that substance. The laws that Machiavelli illuminated 5 centuries ago retain their terrible clarity precisely because they describe human nature rather than cultural accidents, the permanent features of power rather than the temporary conventions of particular eras. Those who appear weak in the domains he identified will indeed be crushed, not because the world has become crueler than it was, but because the fundamental dynamics he mapped continue to operate with mechanical precision beneath whatever comfortable stories society tells itself about progress and enlightenment. The question facing every person who seeks to lead, to influence, to rise above the mass of those who are merely moved by events they cannot understand, is whether they possess the courage to see reality as Machiavelli saw it, rather than as they wish it were. The comfortable path leads toward weakness, masquerading as virtue, toward conflating what should be with what is, toward rigid adherence to principles that sound noble but produce defeat when applied to actual circumstances. This path attracts many because it allows one to feel morally superior while avoiding the difficult calculations that effective action requires. Yet Machiavelli offers no comfort to those who choose this path. He merely describes the fate that awaits them with the detachment of a physician, describing a disease he has seen kill patient after patient. The weak will be crushed not because crushing them is right, but because crushing them is possible. And in competitive systems, the possible eventually becomes actual unless barriers exist to prevent it. The Machiavellian path requires different courage. The courage to abandon comfortable illusions, to act with the world as it is rather than as one wishes it were, to prioritize effectiveness over the approval of those who will judge from positions of safety and ignorance. This path appears harsh because it refuses to pretend that good intentions protect against bad outcomes or that virtue alone produces success in competitive environments. Yet this very harshness contains a strange mercy, the mercy of clear sight that allows effective action, of realistic assessment that prevents the waste of resources on strategies doomed to failure, of cold understanding that enables survival where naive optimism produces only noble defeat. The laws you have encountered throughout this exploration do not constitute a complete guide to leadership, but rather a foundation, the base level of understanding below which no one can operate effectively, regardless of what additional sophistication they develop. A leader who violates these laws does not merely risk failure, but guarantees it. Because these laws describe boundaries that reality enforces regardless of individual preference or moral philosophy. Within these boundaries, enormous variation remains possible. Different leadership styles and approaches can all succeed if they respect these fundamental constraints. Outside these boundaries, only destruction waits. More or less rapid, depending on how thoroughly one violates the principles Machiavelli identified. Your world at this moment contains leaders who understand these laws and leaders who do not. Organizations structured according to Machiavellian principles and organizations built on comfortable illusions about how power should work. The former survive difficulties that destroy the latter. Not because they are morally superior, but because they are strategically superior, because they have built their houses on foundations that reality cannot wash away. The question you must answer for yourself is which kind of leader you will become, which kind of organization you will build or join, whether you will operate with clear sight or with willful blindness. The world does not care which you choose. It will simply produce the consequences that your choice makes inevitable. If you found value in this exploration of how power actually operates when stripped of its decorative pretenses, if you recognized yourself in either the patterns of strength or the patterns of weakness that Machiavelli illuminated, share this understanding with others who struggle in competitive environments without knowing why. Some will reject these truths as too harsh, too cynical, too threatening to their comfortable worldviews. Others will experience the recognition that comes from finally seeing clearly what they had previously sensed only dimly. Those others constitute your natural allies, the ones who prefer uncomfortable truth to comforting lies, and you serve them by spreading knowledge that society prefers to suppress. Subscribe to continue this journey into the actual mechanics of human interaction rather than the mythology that surrounds it. And let me know in the comments which of these 8 laws struck you as most immediately applicable to your own circumstances. Because your application of these principles begins not with grand gestures, but with small recognitions of where you currently project weakness that could be transformed into strength.